Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I want to talk about a bunch of different types of knives that you definitely shouldn't just hand off to people, at least without explaining a little bit. The original video that this topic was inspired by came from Lugermonger, so I just want to get that out of the way really quickly. This is a very popular topic and has always been something that various channels will cover. You see it all over the place on YouTube, and it's interesting to see how the different channels cover this. Some of this is going to be obvious and exactly what you think, and a lot of it is not going to be obvious. I have a lot of pocket knives, and I actually have a bunch of local friends who love to come over and check out all of the different types of stuff. A lot of the stuff that I have is totally safe, and it makes sense, and people kind of figure out how it operates. And other stuff I have learned is definitely not stuff that I just hand off to people, because while it makes sense to me, it doesn't click the same way with other people. So this has been sort of a learning experience to me. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. Anything that I can link in the description, I absolutely will, so you can check that out if you want to. I want to start off here and show something that I think is perfectly fine to hand to people, right? Types of knives that people kind of figure out. Obviously button locks, people kind of, liner locks. It's funny that they, the liner locks, right? Because something we're going to talk about later. And then like your crossbar locking systems, obviously old school slip joints and back locks. Ironically, I feel like slip joints injure people more often just because they don't lock and people kind of forget. But obviously these are things you can hand to people without having to explain too much, and people just kind of figure it out. Here's one that I find is interesting. A lot of channels say don't hand these types of knives to people. And I think it's actually one of the safest types of knives, the safest types of knives on the planet. These are scary. Oh, double action OTF switchblade. Oh, don't hand that to people. It's so dangerous. I would make the argument that this is probably the safest type of knife that exists. Number one, because the entire blade is sheathed within the frame when it is closed. Unlike a pocket knife where, enough force, right, or unintentional, you push on something, doesn't take a whole lot of deliberate force to get the blade to deploy on a locking knife, right, with a lot of the modern systems. This takes deliberate force. And while like on the Microtech Combat Troodon, they've definitely made this easier, a lot of the newer Microtechs, this is something where you have to make a conscious decision to put enough force into that switch to throw the blade. And the blade does come out safely and in a way that does not put your hand at risk. So while the media and many politicians and just people who are fearful of knives in general because, ooh, scary, loud noise, right? These have been made out to be tactical, hyper dangerous weapons. And certainly the companies who sell them, Microtech, sorry, weird cough, they kind of lean into that a little bit. But the reality of it is that these are incredibly safe, incredibly practical, and they're also not knives that little kids can pick up and readily deploy, unlike a folding knife. So I've made this argument many times, and I know that people expect content creators like myself to put double action OTF knives in a list like this, but no, these are quite the opposite. Very safe, and knives that you absolutely can hand people because they kind of figure it out, right? It's also definitely not strong enough to like really puncture anything. I mean, the blade, it does this and then you can just kind of reset it or pull the blade back out, right? So it's really not super dangerous. Now, moving into knives that I have learned, definitely don't just hand these to people, at least without explaining. The first one is obvious. This type of knife can injure the user, and it also can cause damage to the knife. This is a particularly powerful side-opening automatic knife in the style of a classic swing guard stiletto. This is a custom and very oversized swing guard. The leaf spring in this is super strong. I have a lot of side-opening automatic knives that are powerful, and I would say that this pretty much applies to most side-opening autos. A lot of the modern ones, especially the more expensive ones, like your Protex, your Microtech, stuff like that, they fire really hard. And you always have the guy who's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I've been to plenty of gun shows, right? Yeah, but 50-50, it's flying out of his hand, right? I've learned this from handing off substantially less powerful autos to my friends, and they drop them. I would say probably at least 25% of the time because they're just not ready for it. But obviously, something like this is extremely powerful. I mean, it is crazy how strong the spring in this thing is. It fires so hard, and it's really not even. You can see I'm kind of bracing. I've gotten used to this, but everybody I've ever handed the knife to, I love handing a knife off to my dad and say, hey, get ready, but seriously, hold on to it, you know? And he does, but I love seeing the reaction on his face. He's like, I expected it to be powerful, but not that powerful. Number one, this is the type of thing that too much power and you're trying to catch it as it deploys. It can go tip down and go right into your foot. Definitely have seen some close calls with that. And then also, I'm not going to say how much this knife costs, but it was entirely handmade by Burn Knives. And I don't want this damaged. I don't want the tip damaged. I don't want any other part of it damaged. I'm a collector, right? So for a couple of reasons there, and a lot of it is, you know, damage to the object itself. And this is an obvious one, but yeah, this isn't the type of knife that you just hand to somebody, right? Moving on, this is, when I did this video a while back, this is another one that I talked about, and I actually stand by this, titanium frame locks. Has any of you who collect nicer knives, or just whatever, titanium frame locks, have you ever handed? This is not a knife. You're not going to find a titanium frame lock at Walmart. It's funny though. You can find steel frame locks there, but for some reason, this is a locking system that's been around since the late '90s, invented by Chris Reeve, where we don't call this a liner lock. A lot of people confuse this with a liner lock. A liner lock is going to be a knife that locks via the liner. And there it is right here. So this part right here, this is the liner. It's locking with that. It's underneath the scale. This is a frame lock. The lock is literally part of the frame. For some reason, as soon as the locking system is exposed, I don't know what it is, right? Every time I hand a frame lock off to my dad or any of my friends who have not experienced them, for some reason, their first instinct with these things is to aggressively push in on the frame lock. I don't know what causes people to think that must be how we move the locking system out of the way of the lock face. It's attached to the frame. For some reason, human brains go, obviously you push in, right? I'm not blaming people who don't know, because if you've never experienced them before, then yeah, you're probably going to do that. It's just funny that the brain goes, of course, we need to push the lock further in. It drives me crazy. And every time I go, Dad, don't do that. Because what you're doing is you're mashing that lock face further in to you're mashing the lock further in to the face of the blade. And while it can be corrected by simply, pulling it back out of there, but it's going to be mashed in there. Sometimes you have to use a tool to actually unlock it because you've squished it so far in. A frame lock is simply supposed to engage enough to stay under there until you move it out of the way and close the knife, right? So you mash it in and those surfaces grind, and then you reduce the life of the locking system by a little bit every time that you do that, right? This can also occur just by squeezing it too hard while you're using it, which is part of the reason why I don't love frame locks in the first place. But it's very common to see titanium frame locks on more expensive knives, and it's not something you want to watch somebody do to your more expensive knives. So while it definitely doesn't make sense to people who are not into super expensive knives, there's going to be people watching this video rolling their eyes going, it's a knife. Why are we, first question, why is it so expensive? And why are you getting so mad if I do? Well, if you're not familiar with this stuff, and especially if you're not the person who paid for it, of course it's not going to make sense to you. But for those of you who do collect these knives, especially if you've just started collecting these knives or using them, both, whatever, don't hand these off to people who don't know better. I promise you, that's the very first thing they're going to do. Very first thing they're going to do. Moving on to something kind of in the same vein. Super obvious. Don't hand people super expensive knives. The average person, and not that there's anything wrong with this, the average person, their impression of a pocket knife, regardless of how flashy it is that it is a tool that is not just meant for cutting, but prying, hammering, screwing, throwing into a tree. That's the general idea of a pocket knife, right? You present this, I mean, believe if you follow any knife content creators on TikTok, that's the the comments, right? Yeah, a knife is meant to do all of those things. And if you're much more familiar with knives, then you'll know that they are simply cutting tools, right? That people use for a bunch of different tasks that they probably shouldn't be using them for, and that's because their dad or grandpa taught them to use it that way, right? So, and effectively, ultimately, what they end up with is just a dull piece of metal that's not optimized for any of those tasks, least of all cutting after the blade has been completely and totally dulled. But that's a topic for another time. Don't hand a super expensive knife to somebody, to the average person, because they're going to immediately try to cut something with it, and there's a good chance that they're going to try and cut something with it that they shouldn't cut at all with any knife, right? This is and they will do it without warning. I had a situation, not with this knife, but I handed a knife off to a friend who immediately, for some reason, tried to cut a key ring, the thin ring that it was one of the cheaper ones that a dealership attaches to your fob after it's been serviced. But I was like, whoa, what are you doing? And he was like, I just want to see if it'll cut through this metal, which sounds insane to somebody who's familiar with knives, but apparently this is a totally rational thought to the average person. Again, I get it. If you don't know, you don't know. But don't hand this stuff off to people, right? Without explaining first. Hey, I'm going to hand you this knife. Please do not try to cut anything with it. Please do not try to stab a car hood with this or, remove a nail from a board. I would prefer that you didn't, because this is expensive and I used my money for it, not yours. So definitely don't do that. We're also going to talk about double-edged folding knives, which are super rare, but as you can see here, this knife is legitimately double-edged. This knife in particular actually almost caused, it should have been, it's my fault. I mean, all of this stuff is, definitely, if something bad happens, it's not the fault of the person you're handing it to. It's the fault of the person handing the item off. This is a folding, truly sharp on both sides dagger is very, very rare. And the way that you put it back into the frame, obviously, is not by touching the spine as you would a regular pocket knife like this if you're going to do it like that. You can't do that on this knife because it's sharp on both sides, right? But the instinct is to do that. And I had forgotten, of course, this person that is wanting to, take a look at this knife, it's going to be their instinct to use that index finger to put the knife away, whether they do it with two hands or whatever. And that's exactly what happened. They put their hands down. I said, don't touch that. It's sharp. And that in that moment, I realized I didn't explain this, and there was that shudder in the hand, and I thought, they're going to drop it. It's either going to, put them, this is not a knife that I use. This is a super rare, Sharp by Design Arch Nemesis full dress. There's only 4 of them in existence that have this weave milling on the blade. So this is not a knife that I'm going to take out and use. Certainly not for what I paid for it. But that's an obvious one there, and it was my fault. I should have explained it, right? So the way that you put it away is you disengage the frame lock, and then you use the guard here to put it away, or the other flipper tab. A little obvious, kind of an eye roller one, but yeah, if you're new to this stuff and you pay a lot of money, especially if it's a folding dagger, just be aware. They're going to try and put their index finger on it. Here's another kind of obvious one, and it's gravity knives. This is the original Riot XO, the one that does not have a lock. And a lot of us, this knife became super popular very quickly, and I feel like it's almost like every other person in the knife world picked up some form of the Riot XO. It's really cool how this works. Something about the way that this operates is so foreign, and it's not even that confusing. Like, of course, after handling and using these things, specifically the XOs, for so long, it seems so obvious how they operate. And people will watch, my friends will watch me operate this knife and think, yeah, I can do that. Something about the way that this opens up is a little bit startling to people, and then they forget that the blade, there's nothing, it's not like you push a button or pull back. The blade simply will come out if you're holding it upside down. So there's something a little bit odd about how the frame opens up and how the blade falls out that makes people suddenly much less confident, that initial opening. I have seen this so many times, it's weird watching what happens with people in their hands when they try to deploy it. Not this one, but my other one that is a user has been dropped multiple times by people simply not expecting the frame to feel the way that it does when it opens up. It's kind of a, oh my gosh, the frame is opening. Oh, I forgot that the blade falls out of it. And again, it sounds so stupid, but it's absolutely true. Anybody who owns the Riot Exo, especially if you own the one without the locking system that keeps the frame on there, the new ones have a lock that keeps that from happening. How many times have you handed it off to somebody, and they've dropped it? Of course, the answer to this is don't hand the knife off. I'm sure that the comments will be filled with that. Everybody, loves to be the one to point that out. Yes, good job, obviously, right? But if it does, if the opportunity arises, where somebody wants to take a look at your interesting pocket knife for one reason or another, which is pretty common, right? Then yeah, it's something to consider. We have to, again, talk about Riot here. And this is another obvious one. I think this is probably one of the most dangerous knives that I have, and I actually hate getting this thing out because I've injured myself with it. So for this one, it should be knives you don't handle. This is the Riot Exo K, I think. It's a transforming karambit style thing. So there's a couple of things about this knife that just really make me mad. Number one, there's a way to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and do it here. But the way that this is like an inertia, a transforming inertia or movement style knife. And it's designed for quick deployment and self-defense. The problem is that if you mess this up, right, while you're trying to do it, whether you're calm and just trying to do it for the first time, or you're actually being attacked by laser ninja warriors, from outer space, the adrenaline would definitely cause me to do this incorrectly. But essentially what you want to do here to release this is push this, looks like just a screw holding it together. It's a button. You push that, see, I hate this thing. You push it, you whip it out, and then you're supposed to whip it backwards, and now it's ready to go. And now in this position, it's fine. It's locked out. Here's what happens. This is how I injured myself with this, and a lot of people, did. You whip this, and the blade comes to about here, right? So then when it comes around, it can go directly into your palm, or the edge can actually land right on the standoff there, which messes with it definitely can screw up the edge. It's not something that even owning this thing and owning the trainer that it came with, it's not something that I personally am super comfortable handling. I don't really like it at all. And I keep it in my collection just as an example of something that I feel like probably should have some extra steps in the design. Many people who own this knife have told me the same thing. It looks really cool, right? And it's neat that it opens up and transforms, so it's sort of robot raptor talon thing. This is absolutely not a knife that I get out or even mention that I own because everybody wants to try it. And a couple of times it's gotten people, and it's not a fun one. It's not a fun situation for that to happen, right? So yeah, and it's not, the reason I say knives like this is because there are other ones that exist. Riot has another sort of inertia blade that's like a push dagger that whips around from the inside of the handle. And for a number of reasons, I don't like that one as well. Even, having the opportunity to handle it and review it, that's also something that I don't like handing to people. I just feel like the likeliness that it's going to injure the user is far too high. And then finally, far and away, I think the most dangerous knife that you can readily get your hands on, as long as it's legal, are single action OTFs. Now, these come in various powers, right? This here is a Max Ace Draco, and if you're thinking that looks like the Microtech Halo 6, yeah, it was probably modeled after it almost exactly. It's not a one-to-one copy. They changed just enough for it to be their own thing, but it definitely was inspired by the Microtech Halo 6, which is equally dangerous. This is of the category of single action OTF that is exceptionally powerful. Something like the Paragon Para X, not nearly as powerful. The problem with these and the difference between a single action and a double action is that you are creating most of the force required to throw the blade or retract the blade, by pushing up and spreading those springs out, right? It's not necessarily primed within the handle. You are pushing up and stretching those springs out, and then once you cross the event horizon, the chassis will throw the blade, right? This is primed. There's a huge coil spring in there, and it's just sitting there waiting to fire out with probably 5 to 10 times the force of a double action OTF when we're talking about this, right? Now this has a safety. You can't just push straight down. You actually have to pull back on this switch and then down. Oh boy. The force of that. I mean, I can show you how these sort of reload. We'll push this button down here, and you can see what's happening here is we're pulling and sort of you're cocking that blade, right? So this is an alarming amount of force. Anybody who has never handled a single action OTF, every single one of them will be so shocked with the amount of force where that blade comes out. And it's absolutely enough force. I mean, even a double action, would probably go through, just use a piece of paper here. But something like this is easily enough force to go through something like paper without stopping. I mean, it's gonna go, right? And it's gonna get all the way out there and it's gonna lock out. Even into something like cardboard, which will stop the blade. But not, in fact, you know what? We'll just, we'll use an aluminum can here. I don't mind. This will stop the blade, but it will make a hole in this can. That is not something that you want going into your hand. And I can tell you, the reason I know that is because I accidentally fired I think it was the Hydra, the Heretic Hydra. Just not paying attention and being stupid, which is usually the cause of most knife injuries. I accidentally fired one of those into my hand. It was this hand here, and it was this right on this callus. And it gave me a good, probably a 1/4 inch hole, even with that callus slowing it down just a little bit. That was an awful, awful feeling. And at this point, it's made it to where single action OTFs, I'm always just a little nervous about them. And these are definitely knives that, if this is like your everyday carry, number one, geez, if you don't put this in your pocket, the right amount of force, having something like that go off in your pocket, yeah, it might, I mean, it's, you're not going to die probably, but it's good enough that injury that you might have to go to the hospital. But also having something like this, you shouldn't be irresponsible to the point where you're just laying stuff like that down on surfaces where anybody can pick it up. But yeah, definitely something a little kid could pick up and technically deploy, because it doesn't take a lot of deliberate force to accidentally deploy this. You do have to have, that top piece on these particular types. Not all of them have that. Some of them don't have safeties. It's just a button, right? The old Microtech Halos don't have them, right? But it's definitely something that somebody could accidentally fire. But even if you hand it to somebody, you really have to explain, hey, this is going to fire way harder than anything else that you've ever handled, right? This isn't a knife that I typically get out and hand to people for that exact reason. So most of this was really just for entertainment and fun. The vast majority of people who are going to watch this video probably already know this stuff, but it's still a fun topic for sure. It's still a topic that I enjoy talking about. I think the last time I did this video was years and years and years ago. So I thought maybe it's time to talk about this again now that I have had many of these experiences with people. But let me know what you think. Let me know what your own rules are. If you have any other types of knives that you feel like, initially it seemed like, totally fine to hand this off to your buddy and then something happened. Let me know. I'd like to hear your thoughts down in the comments. That's going to be it from me today. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.